Hello, and we are here with composer Kenneth Amis, the composer of Trumpeters Lullaby. Kenneth is also a phenomenal tuba player, composer, and conductor. And we are honored to have you today in this conversation to introduce your beautiful piece, the piece that is on today's program, Trumpeters Lullaby.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being invited and having my music played, of course. This particular piece was commissioned by a very old friend of mine who I went to college with. He's a trumpet player, and he's now a teacher and he has his own studio. And he wanted me to write a piece for his studio and for him to solo on. So I was thinking back over our history, and one of the earliest things I remember is back in college, one of his primary teachers and one of my mentors and coaches for chamber music was a man by the name of Roger Voisin. And he was a long-time trumpet player in the Boston Symphony Orchestra. He actually won the audition when he was 16 and played third while his father, who had come over from France, played first trumpet. But Roger Voisin premiered a lot of pieces, a lot of standard orchestral pieces, a lot of the Ravel and Bartok big orchestral pieces. But he also premiered a lot of popular pieces that the Boston Pops played, including things like Leroy Anderson's Sleigh Ride and Trumpeter's Holiday and Bugler's Holiday, and a piece called A Trumpeter's Lullaby. And we always used to play this at events that Professor Voisin would schedule for us as a quintet. So I had a student group, and I played with my colleague, Marc Reese. And Roger Voisin was still in touch with the Boston Symphony, even though he had retired from playing and was primarily teaching. So whenever the Boston Symphony had an outreach engagement or their open house at Symphony Hall, he would perform with my quintet, and we would perform these signature pieces that he had premiered, like Bugler's Holiday and the Trumpeter's Lullaby, and Toy Trumpet was another one. And so these were one of my earliest memories about what a trumpet teacher was like and how they could reach out beyond just the trumpet studio. And so I wanted to give something to my friend Marc as a commission that sort of brought back those memories. And so one of the long-running jokes that other brass players have against high brass players, that is trombones, euphonium, and tuba players, always look at the high brass players and say, well, you guys complain too much, that you're always tired and too much playing and your chops hurt and things like that. And we jokingly call them babies because of all the whining that we perceive that they do. And most of them are fine with this, and they sort of laugh it off. Of course, they're playing much higher, and so it is more taxing for them with that little tiny mouthpiece. So I was thinking this would be kind of a nice theme to hit because my friend Marc had recently had his first child, and so he was dealing with all the trauma we feel when we're trying to take care of a baby and how a baby cries a lot and eats a lot and poops a lot and does all these things. And so I tied that together with this idea of a lullaby because that's one of the pieces that I played with Professor Voisin, and Professor Voisin was a mentor to both me and Marc. So I tried to combine all those things together, and instead of trumpeters singular, Trumpeters Lullaby, I wrote a piece for Marc's entire studio and him, Trumpeters Plural Possessive Lullaby. So the piece basically represents my friend Marc Reese now being the teacher and tending to all his students, which I jokingly refer to as babies. So you'll actually hear in this piece that there are a lot of effects that are simulating the crying of a baby, a lot of the dissonance and the tension that you hear when you're a parent and you're woken up at 2 in the morning and have to go tend the baby. And I've found a lot in my own teaching that working with other individuals, no matter what age they are, it's more than just telling them how to physically play an instrument, how to physically blow into a pipe, or even how to interpret a specific type of art form. It's a lot about tending to the person themselves and tending to the emotional fluctuations of the person themselves and psychologically where they are. So I think this piece is very representative of what it's like to be a teacher, not just of trumpet players, but of any particular instrument. And so when you listen to this, you can either think about it from the perspective of a parent dealing with a child and hearing that tension and trying to ease that tension with whatever lullaby comes to your mind, or as a teacher working with students of all ages and trying to reassure them that what they're doing is good, and even though a lot of things are subjective in the music and the arts in general, they will persevere and everything will be all right in the end. And so that was kind of the genesis and inspiration behind Trumpeters Lullaby.
And what a beautiful piece it is. I mean, the ensemble is enjoying it immensely. And as we talked before, you can explain to people your reaction to a crying baby, but it is not until you have experienced that the cry of your own baby that you understand this emotional, super reaction that you have when you hear the sound of it. And you did a great job with the group in the way you instrument in the orchestration of it, the instrumentation of it, the distribution of the voices in the trumpet septet, 7 trumpets, the use of the mutes, and of course the contrast with the flugelhorn that sings this beautiful lullaby, trying to calm down these crying babies. Definitely a beautiful piece, and thank you so very much for giving us your music and for giving us the opportunity to play it.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity for me to hear it again, because a lot of times composers will hear the premiere but will not find out that the piece is being played in many other different places. So thank you for reaching out and letting me know that you're doing the piece, and I'll listen to it with fresh ears as I do all my pieces, because once I've written it and given it away, it's everybody's piece. So that's part of the joy of being a composer, is that you interact with people through the music. And so whenever you hear your own music played back to you, it's fresh because it comes from a different perspective. And as we spoke before, and as you just mentioned, the perspective of someone who hasn't had children yet may be a little bit different. The perspective of someone who's babysat for kids will be different from someone who's never babysat for kids. So yeah, I look forward to that, and thank you so much for taking on the challenge, because I know the piece is difficult and taxing for all the players. So I appreciate you taking on that challenge.
Thank you, Kenneth.